Good day, everyone. At this point, we will be discussing about different kinds of variables. So in our lesson 3, we are going to discuss variables in quantitative research. So again, this is your teacher, Rhea Ana May C. Ariban Sitosta, and I am requesting you to listen very well to this discussion. In this lesson, learning will be focused on the different kinds of variables used in quantitative research and how they are applied in research studies. Take note, variables play a significant role in quantitative research. When you intend to accomplish something through research, the boundaries of your goal must be defined first to direct your focus into a specific character or condition through identifying the variables of your research study. In order to get an answer to an inquiry that they are investigating, researchers will observe and measure the quality or quantity of the object of the study. It is therefore imperative for the researcher to identify the variable significant in explaining observed effects or behavior. Before going further, let us analyze first the given situation. For example, a teacher wants to examine the factors that influence the low academic performance of a student. What would be the possible factors? It can be that the student did not understand the instructions, or instead of studying, the student has just simply slept. Or it can also be that the student ran out of time to finish the test, or the student was not able to focus during the review. All the factors mentioned are considered variables. So at this point, we are going to know what is variable. Variables is any element or entity which can be measured per quantity or quality. You may manipulate or control these variables depending on the kind of research you are conducting. So this is an entity that can take on different values. This is also an aspect of theory that can vary or change as part of the interaction within the theory. Anything that can vary can be considered as variable. These are needed to understand differences in a particular research study. As an additional, a variable may take different forms. For example, age, gender, IQ level, hair color, and others. Take note that anything can be variable. It is something that a researcher is interested in. Please also remember that when conducting a quantitative study, you are expected to figure out the relationship between your variables. It is important that you understand what is the kind of variable that you use in your study for you to also choose what best statistical method that you are going to use in analyzing your study. So maganda, alam natin kung ano yung variable na meron tayo para ma-apply din natin kung ano yung statistical method. Kasi from the variable itself, dun pa lang malalaman na natin na ito pala yung statistical method na pwede sa ganitong variables. Okay? So let us now move to the different classifications or general types of variables. One way of classifying variable is through determining their nature. Based on this classification, the two general types of variables are the quantitative variables, which is also known as numerical, and the qualitative variables, which is also known as categorical. This classification would determine the role of variables in a particular study. So let us study the kinds of quantitative variables or the numeric classification of variables. So as we all know, the numeric classification of variables are variables with values that describe a measurable numerical quantity. So variables can be classified as numeric or quantitative and categorical or qualitative. So pag sinabing quantitative variables or numerical, these variables are with values that describe measurable numerical quantity. It answers the question how many or how much. So numeric variables are considered as quantitative variables. Okay, so let us now move to the different kinds of quantitative variables. The first one is the discrete variables. So discrete variables only focus the whole number itself. So this is countable whole numbers. It does not take negative values or values between fixed points. Example, number of students in a class or a group size. So it can be counted, can only be donated by positive whole numbers, and are not described in ranges. So another example, the number of teachers in a school, class number, or number of siblings. Take note that discrete variables are whole numbers because in the given example, we do not have half student and one or half teachers in a school. So, for example, sa number of students, hindi pwedeng 23.5 kasi wala namang kalahating estudyante. Okay, so always remember ang discrete variables ay whole numbers. Another would be the continuous or interval variables. So, continuous variables assume any value between a certain set of real numbers depending on the scale used. So, please take note, ang continuous at saka interval, pwede silang magpalitan ng tawag. So, this is fractional, non-whole number, values that can either be a positive or negative. Example, yung height, yung temperature. While discrete variables can only assume any whole value within the limits of the given variables, in continuous variables or interval variables, we can consider the number in between the whole number. Example, if you're going to observe in time, you do not only look at the hours. We also recognize that there is minutes and seconds. So, yung interval between the whole numbers, kino-consider yon. Another example, yung age. In age between 13 and 14, we also consider that there are people who are 13 and a half or 13 and 3/4. Another example is the weight, the height, the temperature. Please notice that continuous or interval variables recognizes the values between whole numbers. Okay? So under ng continuous or interval variable is the ratio. So this is type of data which is similar to interval. The only difference is the presence of a true zero value, which means that nothing exists for that variable, and that zero simply means none. So it cannot have a negative value. For example, pag sinabing the difference between the temperature at 1 a.m. and 2 p.m. is 0. So, ibig sabihin, wala talaga. Wala talagang difference doon. Okay? Kasi 0 yung value. So, yung 0, ibig sabihin talaga, totally wala. Okay? Yan, example sa height and weight. For example, pinag-aralan yung isang bata and then binigyan siya ng mga supplement. So, pinag-aralan siya for 6 months. Sa pag-aaral na yon, nakita yung difference ng height improvement niya nang siya ay sinimulang bigyan ng supplement hanggang after 6 months ay 0 yung difference. So, ibig sabihin, wala talaga. Okay? Okay, so another classification will be the categorical or qualitative variables. So, categorical variables or qualitative variables are variables with values that describe a quality or characteristics of a data or unit. So it answers the questions, what type and which category. Categorical variables are qualitative in nature. Despite lacking numerical value, these variables can still be used in quantitative research. So, categorical or qualitative variables are divided into two kinds. So let us see the kinds of qualitative variables. The first one is the dichotomous variable. This variable represents only two categories. Example, a yes or no question, or a true or false, or in terms of biological sex, male and female. Okay? So Daiko, only two category. Next will be the nominal variable. So in this variable, more than two categories or values. Example, hair color, civil status, blood type, mode of transportation, source of income, and citizenship. So maraming category. Hindi mo pwedeng sabihin, ito yung category. Kung hindi, marami. Okay, next will be the ordinal variable. So in this category, characteristics, variables that exhibit the characteristics of both quantitative and qualitative. So ordinal variables takes a value which can be logically ordered or ranked. The values can be numerical like quantitative variables. Can also be arranged into specific non-numerical classes like qualitative variables. For instance, frequency is described as rare, seldom, sometimes, almost, always, or the level of satisfaction, not satisfied, satisfied, extremely satisfied. Kahit na ito ay non-numerical, pero in order, nararank pa din. Okay? Another example is the sizes of pants. Small, medium, large, XL, 2XL, 3XL, or the academic ranking. To make it simple, ordinal variables serve the purpose of classification and ranking. Okay? So variables can also be categorized based on their purpose or role. This purpose and role are especially evident in an experimental study. So let's talk about the independent variables and dependent variable. So ang dependent at independent variables ay makikita lang natin sa experimental research kasi dito may manipulation of data. So dependent variables are variables that change because of another variable. These are usually affected by the manipulation of the independent variable. Dependent variable are variable that are monitored in an experiment. It is also called the effect variable or the presumed effect. Ang dependent variable naaapektuhan sa ginawa na pagbabago sa independent variable. Okay? While ang independent variable naman are variable presumed to cause changes in another variable. It is usually manipulated in an experiment. It is also called the causal variable. So kapag non-experimental like descriptive, correlational, or ex post facto, hindi natin ginagamit ang dependent at independent. Okay? So example, ito yung ating problem. The effect of studying in the academic performance of students. So ano ang ating independent variable will be the studying, and then ang dependent variable ay ang academic performance because studying affects academic performance. So depende kung nag-aral ka na mabuti o hindi ka masyadong nag-aral o talagang wala kang ginawang pag-aaral. So maapektuhan yung academic performance. Nakadepende siya dito sa independent variable natin na studying. Okay? So another kind of variable is the extraneous variable. So any variable that is not categorized as dependent and independent variable is called as extraneous variable. It is undesirable that can influence the result of the study. Take note that these are variables which are already existing or extra variables that are already existing. Hence, we have the term extraneous variables. And because of this, as much as possible, it must be controlled because they can offer alternative result. So, yung extraneous variable, pwede rin siyang tawaging confounding variable. So, ang special type ito na extraneous variable, which is a variable that a researcher fails to control and threatens the validity of the research procedure. By knowing the extraneous or confounding variables, you will be able to lessen the adverse effect of this variable in your study. Okay, so let us have some example. The effect of playing music on academic performance of students. So the independent variable would be the playing of music and the dependent variable is academic performance. Kasi depende kung ipi-play, kung anong klaseng music ang ipi-play mo. So, maapektahan nun ang academic performance ng student. So, the possible extraneous variable that might influence or change the result would be noise, ventilation, and lighting. So, these are considered as extraneous or confounding variables because if they are not be controlled, they might offer a different result that is not expected in the study itself. For example, kahit classical music ang i-play mo all throughout sa study time ng student, pero yung noise and then may ventilation, may effect yon, mainit o kaya hindi maganda yung lugar and then yung lighting. So, pwede rin yung magkaroon ng ibang effect dun sa research mo or sa study mo. So to end this lesson, we can say that in order to get an answer to an inquiry that we are investigating, as researchers, we should observe and measure the quality or quantity of the object of the study. It is therefore imperative for us to identify the variables significant in explaining observed effects or behavior. Okay, so that's all for our kinds of variables in quantitative research. I hope you have learned something from me. Thank you and God bless you all.